You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hey there, this is Andrea Heng on the Money Talks podcast. And this is where we tell you how to save, invest, budget, and protect your money regardless of what stage of life you are at. Now, if you are new here, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube Music, your choice. That way, you'll be the first to know when a new episode drops. As always, I have my producer, Junaini, with me to give us the latest headlines. So, June, what do you have for us today?
Well, if you're in the market to buy or sell your HDB flat, listen up. There will be a new resale flat listing service on HDB's online portal later this month.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So it works like any other property listing site. You can filter your results according to location, flat type, and remaining lease.
Okay.
But the difference is
I knew that was a but.
But the difference is that only prospective buyers with a valid HDB flat eligibility letter, or the HFE, can get the seller's contact details and schedule viewing appointments.
Okay.
They're also able to see personalized payment plans based on their housing grant and HDB loan amount.
Okay,
if they
so
have that
that's
option.
so that's really helpful because then you can check if you are within budget, and a lot of us don't actually know whether a house fits our budget or not, right?
Exactly, that's right. So, and for sellers, they can only create listing if they're eligible to sell their flats. So, for that, they'll need to have registered their intent to sell. And and they can only post once, so no duplicates.
So it's kind of like within the seamless HDB ecosystem.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
And okay, so of course, everyone wants to price their flats as high as possible.
Of course.
But sellers on this platform will get an alert if their asking price exceed the highest transacted price for something similar by 10% or more.
Ooh.
Same applies if their listing price is too low.
Okay, I can see how that makes things more efficient. All right, I'm really looking forward to just exploring this. Not that I plan to sell my house anytime soon. Okay, so what's next for us?
Speaking of property, this is for the folks who are planning to invest in the upcoming Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone.
Oh.
So the Johor state government is considering implementing policies to curb property price speculation.
Oh, wow.
So far, this property speculation has led to land and residential prices going up in some areas. And this is according to Johor's chief minister.
Okay, so what kind of policies are they referring to? What are they talking about here?
So one possibility is introducing additional premiums on the properties and that Johorians will be prioritized if they want to buy homes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, something that potential investors need to plan for. So thanks very much, June.
Anytime.
Thought we'd start today's episode with some comments that we've received on our episode on how to optimize your skills future credit. MP4 Journal says, I've done a few courses just this year alone. Wish the $4,000 top-up is focused more on the younger generation to upskill. Great insight. Love the sharing. We love you sharing your thoughts with us, MP4 Journals, whoever you are. Thank you for tuning in. Newstar346 asks if unemployed older workers will get job opportunities after these upgrading courses using Skills Future credits. Very important question, especially since retirement is being delayed. Always love your feedback on our episodes. So back to today's topic, changing jobs, right? It's daunting enough. But so long as you continue to draw a salary, there's financial stability, isn't there? But changing careers, that's a whole different ballgame, especially when it comes to your income. It's even more significant when you're pivoting in the middle of your career or even late in your career, right? It's scary. The truth is, you're not likely to get a pay increase. In fact, depending on where you go, the type of job role that you undertake in the future, a pay cut is actually the more realistic scenario. So how do you pivot professionally without destabilizing your finances? Today's guest is here to help us with that. He's Peter Tan, financial consultant with Unicorn Financial Solutions, but here's a fun fact. He wasn't always a financial consultant. He's actually pivoted before. So no better person to join us here on the Money Talks podcast. Welcome to Money Talks, Peter.
Hi, Andrea.
So I have friends who have built up an entire career. Maybe let's give an example in the media industry. And they are seriously thinking into pivoting to things like counseling or working in the mental health sector, perhaps even going into AI, but for a very technical aspect of the job. So if you are in your 40s, you're financially stable, but you also have things like rent, mortgage to pay, children that you have to fund, what's the first thing that I need to carefully think about?
I think the first thing we have to understand that this is more of a career planning question. It's not so much of the finances, because ultimately it's a tension between our lives as well as our livelihood. First of all, I think we must understand what is it that we really want in life. And of course, if we are pivoting, whether we are pivoting from something which is more desirable to undesirable, financially speaking, or is it the other way around?
Right.
Yeah, so for people who are pivoting upwards financially, not so big of an issue. But for people who, like you mentioned, are pivoting into areas like maybe lower paying jobs, then they need to think through very carefully whether this is a sacrifice that they are willing to make.
Yeah,
Because at the end of the day, I suppose that some of the things that we enjoy doing, some of the things that we are feeling there's a strong sense of meaning, purpose, we can do it as a form of hobby as well. So we need to consider those factors.
What are the questions that we need to ask ourselves when we're planning to embark on this career pivot, financially speaking especially? What questions should we ask?
Yeah. First of all, I think there's always wisdom in the collective, whereby if you search online, most of the time people will ask you to at least set aside 6 months of your income.
Yeah.
So if you do not know where to start, that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
But of course, we need to understand what that 6 months of income needs to fund.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's not just for people who are pivoting, but for every single person, they should have a budget.
Absolutely, yes.
So with the budget, it should include things that we can classify as our needs as well as our wants. And in terms of needs, not just today's needs, but tomorrow's needs.
Yeah.
Meaning that even if I'm not married, but if we can't really rule out that possibility, I should have some savings that will allow me to buy a house or settle down, have the wedding.
Yeah,
So
prepare all those other
this
finances.
will be important. Not forgetting that there'll be unexpected situation.
Oh, yes.
Like during COVID, I have even friends who are like in areas such as construction. Suddenly we realize that having 6 months of buffer is not enough. Well, as we know, the Singapore government managed things quite well.
Yeah.
So in that sense, people still have their jobs. But I think what is most important is that for those who have the awareness, and they had the awareness even before the crisis came, it's a lot easier for them.
Right. So here's the thing. There are two ways that I think about it when I'm thinking about a career pivot, right? So do I save up a whole bunch of cash 6 months and beyond, say, right? And then if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back to my old job. Or should I find a slow and steady way of gradually working into this career pivot, say internally within my existing organization? What are your thoughts there?
So again, let's zoom out of talking about pivoting and let's look at financial prudence for everybody. If I may, using my own example.
Sure, yeah.
So I was working in a church,
Right.
which is a non-profit organization. I must say the pay was quite modest.
Okay.
And then from there, I became a financial consultant, which is self-employed.
Yes.
So already the pay is not very high.
Yeah.
Then I jump into something that has no pay.
Yes.
I need to build it up. But what really helped me was that in my early 20s, I realized that my parents probably do not have retirement funds. And based on what I have, I better start early.
Yeah.
So I never thought of I'll be pivoting at some point.
Right.
But it's just that I knew I have to start saving up.
It's one of those life moments, right, that you just realize, okay, I think it's now time to do something about it.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So saving up for the short term is important. Saving up that lump sum that we can use when we pivot. But if we know that by the time we are in our 30s, we haven't really saved up that any money, that's quite worrying as well. So in my case, thankfully, I have about 3 months of cash set aside,
Okay.
3 months worth of income in cash. Then I have about another close to 2 years of savings
Wow.
in different financial instruments. Bearing in mind, of course, that I shouldn't touch them as much as I can. But you see, in that sense, then we get to work the other way around, whereby I'm preparing for something, and then along the way, the need comes. I can decide how much I want to withdraw.
Yes.
It's a bit like if we have been diligent in studying for our O-levels, A-levels.
Yeah.
If a mock quiz comes up, you're not surprised by it.
I like
Yes.
that reference. I like that analogy, actually. You introduced the concept of age where in your 20s, you realize something. By your 30s and 40s, you should have this much set aside. If not, then it's a bit worrying. Which brings me to my question about time horizon. When it comes to thinking about a career pivot, what kind of runway should we give ourselves to make sure that we have that preparation? And what should happen during that runway?
Again, it depends on how fast and how much a person can save.
Yeah.
Which depend on factors like how much they are currently earning, what are their possible sources of outflow. But I would say that if a person is very determined and clear, he should be able to speed things up a lot faster.
Yeah.
In Singapore, let's say we look at statistics.
Yes.
When you look at the MOM statistics, a person's income from age 25 to 35 will keep going up.
I remember those years.
After that, it may be at a peak for a while, say until about 45 to
Right.
50.
Uh-huh.
And after 50, it's going downwards.
Oh dear.
Again.
Right.
Right.
So yeah, that's an actual runway to think about, isn't it?
Yes. So I would say that from age 25 to 35, it's as if you're traveling via an escalator.
All right.
With that kind of push,
Yeah.
then you probably just need a shorter time frame. Maybe 3 to 6 months, you should be able to save up. But by the time we hit those years, which are difficult,
Yeah.
on top of that, with our family commitments, it could be a lot harder. So it may even take some years of preparation.
Yeah, your outflows are also generally higher with the
Yes.
older you get as well, yeah? Now, how do we then approach our other financial assets like investments, insurance plans, funding for kids, family, household expenses, right? Should we consider lowering our contributions for these, pause them altogether? What do we do here?
I mean, working with people, we know that human habits are hard to change. So I wouldn't advise trying to, as the first step, to take out any item.
Okay.
That's going to be quite difficult. So
Realistic, I have to say. Very
realistic,
pragmatic.
Yes. So I think it's better at looking at how we can cut maybe 10% from every single item.
Okay.
And if I realize I can't trim off some items, then it must mean that it is quite necessary.
Right.
For example, I can't trim away my boys' childcare expenses. If I can, then I probably wouldn't have done it in the first place.
That's true. That's true. So you're saying that the approach can be, I'll shave off 10% of every little expense.
Yes.
Just to test and see, okay, can I live without it?
Yes, because for example, if we look at people's budget, quite often one of the big expense will be eating out.
Yeah.
That means when you are working,
Yeah.
you eat in the office.
Yeah, try as you might.
Yeah,
You're
and then you
tired
have
at the end of the
like
day. You
2
cannot
to 3 meals
cook.
that you'll be eating out.
Yeah.
So what 10% really means is that you're probably just cutting off 1 or 2 meals
Yeah.
eating outside.
Reasonable. These are very manageable goals. That's the thing, right?
Yes.
It's manageable so that it's not such a shock to the system. It's not a shock to you, and it's also not a shock to your family
Yes,
as well.
yeah.
Yeah. What about our investment plans and insurance plans? I mean, we know that we can take a premium holiday, for example. What are other options that we can take a look at?
Unfortunately, this is a pinpoint of a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because by the time we reach our 30s, maybe we realize we've chalked up a number of insurance policies.
Yep.
Sometimes we can't even remember what we got them for. Maybe
Yep.
we wanted to support a friend, or we happen to have
Yeah.
a friend with a health concern. So I guess it's important to, if we can, record somewhere why we got those instruments in the first place.
Got it. Because there might be overlaps, right?
Yes, there might be some overlaps. And of course, you mentioned already all those things like plans with cash value,
Yeah.
certain amounts you can take out or put back in. Important disclaimer is that most of the time when we do that, there'll be some cons to it.
Yeah.
Therefore, we need to look at the bigger picture. Definitely, we can read up online, etc. But if you have a friend that you can trust
Yeah.
who's in this industry, this is where you can talk to them. Good thing is that I think due to the increase of regulations
Yeah.
from MAS as well as the competitiveness of the industry, most of us, we may think of financial advisors as the people that we only meet when we're in transactions.
Yeah.
But when the standard is forcing us to raise our competency, this is where you can talk through more specifically what are the plans, if you could somehow rank them in order of importance to you at the point of your life.
Yeah.
And pretty much if you try to keep it as much as you can, but as and when you really have to, then you can just release them or adjust them.
Yeah. Obviously, there are bills to pay, there are your insurance plans as we talked about, but there are also debts to service, right? You still have debts to pay. So how can we then minimize the pressure on our credit line so that we can still pursue the career pivot with less of a financial worry? Because we already have these other burdens to worry about, right? And then we have the anxiety of,
Yes.
I don't know if I'm going to make it. This is a new career altogether. So if I can take away the pressure of debt, how can I do that?
So it's important for us to look at a few things. First of all, we always try to pay off those debts that has the higher interest.
Yeah, credit cards, my
Yes.
friend.
And of course, we have to look at the debts which are considered maybe justifiable
Right.
and those that are not.
Okay, so what's the difference between a justifiable debt and an unjustifiable debt?
Okay, so I feel that first of all, we need to look at who can be our trusted advisors. So if you have a family, I think your spouse will be the best person
Oh, yeah.
to tell you. Because in that sense,
Because they're the ones nagging at you.
they're the
right?
ones, because they know that you also be checking on them.
That's
so it works
true.
both ways.
That's true.
So
Yes,
it's
you were saying.
important to look at what the family really needs. Housing, of course, because if you look at, for example, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, everyone needs a shelter.
Yep.
Then, of course, the question is whether do we need the house that we are currently staying in.
So it's one thing to have shelter, but it's the type of shelter, whether you can sustain it financially, right?
Yes. But of course, we know that compared to other things, maybe a house is more illiquid. But we still need to have that in mind.
Right.
Other things could be, for example, your car and the things that we buy with a credit card.
Yeah.
But as a general rule of thumb, I don't think we should chalk up any credit cards.
Yeah.
It's something that we should pay off immediately.
I agree. And it's a lesson I learned the hard way.
Yes.
Trust me. Okay. So in order to pivot, I will need to undergo some form of formal training, right? Whether it's a 2-year course or a 2-week course. What should I be thinking about before selecting the course that I'm going to take in order to train for this new career? What should I be thinking about when I'm selecting the course here while comparing my current transferable skills versus new ones?
I think first of all, again, it's more of a career planning question, but it's no doubt an important one. So what we will usually advise people is to think about how it will benefit their lives. That means just do a simple contrast. Like if I were to stay here, what would be the impact
Yeah.
versus if I were to move on? Right? So in that sense, okay, there are some people who move because no choice. They feel that their health will be compromised, their family relationships will be compromised.
Yeah.
I think that would be the highest tier reason possibly
Oh, yeah.
that we need to consider a move. For other reasons, then I guess it's more of a grey line,
Yeah.
whereby if you find that you can't really move into something where the finances allow, then you can take a step back. Not saying that we can't, but take a step back and see when would be a better time. Or maybe it's just a matter of needing to do a bit more research.
That's an important point that you made. Taking the time to really study your options
Yes.
and also study your situation. The why is very important. And even though this is a financial topic, we still want to think about it's a way of saving money, right? If you think about this carefully, you'll end up not wasting that money.
Yes.
And just switching for the sake of switching jobs, correct?
I mean, in Singapore, we have, for example, your workforce Singapore.
Yeah.
Your skills future.
Yeah.
So we have all these programs. If I understand correctly, WSG, they have programs like career trials.
Yeah.
You can actually try something before you decide that's really for
Exactly.
you.
And they even have career coaches available to you. So how then should I take advantage of all of this and part of my overall financial plan when this transition takes place in my career?
Maybe I take a step back again. So let's think about what is really a career. A career for most people is their source of identity.
Yeah.
It's the place where they find meaning and purpose in life. So I personally have this principle I follow for myself, that when I can find something I feel is purposeful,
Yeah.
that I'm passionate about, and I see that I have the potential, not necessarily the full competence yet, but the potential to thrive. If I have all three, that is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
But of course, we know that we don't always have that, but I guess it's more of a journey of discovery.
Yeah.
So once we start our first job, probably that's the place to discover more about ourselves, who we are. So once we find that actually there's something that I really want to do, I can imagine myself waking up every morning. I want to do it. I'm willing to do it, even if nobody pays for me. Then that's the time when you start to look at other things in terms of our potential, which pertains to like our skill sets, and whether our personal situation allows for us. When we sit down and we plan, then we realize that we can possibly stretch ourselves more to achieve the things that we want. So sometimes it's a matter of maybe we plan and then we may perhaps earn more. Sometimes it's more of we plan and then we can live with less to achieve the things that we like. So I think it's important from a career standpoint that we understand what we want in life first. And then we try to see whether that works. Stretch ourselves by proper planning. And if it doesn't, then we just have to live with it.
And it pays to start small, right? You don't have to always go all out and say, okay, time for a career change. I'm going to do this now. And it's all or nothing. Just a final thing here I wanted to talk about. So one of the financial, we talked a lot about financial risks when we are thinking about making this career pivot, right? I'm wondering, is there a way we can do this? Yes, we have savings. Yes, our bills are taken care of. We've done our 10% of all our bills and expenses. We're managing all right. But we are still missing a salary. Is there a way that we can ensure we still have some kind of salary that allows us to feel financially secure, even as we are making this transition to a new career? Because I think the feeling of not having a salary, it makes a lot of people very anxious about making a career switch, right?
I believe you're referring to the downtime.
Yes,
that
exactly.
people go through.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. So when we are doing our planning, I think it would be helpful then to see what are one-time off expenses versus recurrent expenses.
Right.
So if you're just referring to a downtime, then I think it warrants us to save more for that.
Right.
And then we just make sure that we have enough to last us through.
Okay. Your planning has to be right down to the detail.
If we always say that if we fail to plan, then we plan to fail. It's true.
If we realize we don't have enough to fund this period, after taking into consideration a buffer, expenses, debts, could we perhaps take on a short-term loan? Is it wise, or are we setting ourselves up for another financial burden?
So if you want to approach it from a more mathematical point of view, we understand that some sort of loans from a proper institution will incur interest.
Sure.
So we need to sit down and ask ourselves whether the income we are getting will it cover. That means whether we foresee our income to be growing, which for a lot of people who are employees is not.
Yeah.
So I think the definitely most justifiable one is when you are starting a business because you project for income to grow.
Right.
Unless you happen to pivot to an industry where you know that there's still the potential of income to go further.
All right. Any final words of advice for those thinking of a career switch and worrying about their finances?
So I think it's always to go back to what we are making a change for. Everyone making a change is on an adventure, but I have also come across those who are changing from, let's say, being a double income family to single, pivoting from working to be a housewife,
you
house
are
husband.
absolutely right.
And
exactly.
so when the going gets tough, the tough gets going because they remember the purpose of why they're doing that. So you go home, you look at your kids, then you realize that there's no sacrifice too great. So just think back on those things and the rest will work out itself if you plan well.
Spoken like a father. Spoken like a true father. Okay, Peter, you know what? This has been a really insightful conversation filled with so much wisdom. Even though we look at things from a dollars and cents view, I think the existential question still matters.
Yes.
Why are we doing this? Because ultimately, it's the why that keeps us going, right? So thank you for reminding us of the factors to think about before we take this journey, exciting for some, a bit nerve-wracking for others, journey to a new career. So before we let you go, we have a segment called Questions from a Hat. So let me get the hat. There are 5 questions in this hat. Pick one and then hand it to me. I'm going to read out the question and then you can give your answer. All right? So the question is, what is pricey but always worth it?
What is pricey but always worth it?
Yeah.
Okay, the first answer that comes out to my mind is dear. My wife.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Because I believe that it's true that behind every successful man, there is a woman.
Absolutely.
So she's the reason why I believe in what I'm doing.
Wow.
And vice versa, when I'm
Yeah.
struggling in anything in life, I believe that I can count on her for support.
She must be a real pillar of support for you at home and for your kids too.
Invite me back another time to talk about family life.
You know what? This does warrant another kind of conversation. I hope my husband is listening to this and thanking me in a later podcast when someone else asks him this question. So once again, Peter, thank you so much for your wisdom. Very kindly here on the Money Talks podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And to you out there, if you are planning to switch careers, thinking about it, even already transitioning into a new role or a new life adventure, let me know. Write to me and tell me about your experiences. Who knows? You might even inspire me to pivot one day. But yeah, thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Now, this podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, plus YouTube Music. And if you really like the Money Talks podcast, please let us know through the ratings and in the comment section. We do keep an eye on that as well. Last but not least, a big thank you to the Money Talks team. Joanne Chan, Tiffany Ang, Crispina Robert, Sayan Wind, Junaini Johari. I'm Andrea Heng. I'll catch you next time.